My name is W.T. McDonald Jr. I'm generally known as Tom McDonald. I'm a proud native of Brazos County, where I've been a lawyer most of my adult life and have served as a county attorney, district attorney, and district judge. I now serve in the capacity of senior district judge, which means that I can take assignments anywhere in the state of Texas for other judges on an as-needed basis, and depending on my schedule, because I do quite a number of mediations. My dad was also a lawyer most of his adult life and was district judge here in Brazos County, was a legislator, and was also the presiding judge of the Court of Criminal Appeals. So I've been around the law and public service most all of my life, and that, coupled with my interest in history and my love for Brazos County, gives me a very keen interest in the history of the legal profession and the law of Brazos County. And so I'd like to share with you a short history of the Brazos County law and the legal community from 1841 until 2011. The first court session in Brazos County was after the county was created by an act of Congress of the Republic of Texas on January the 30th, 1841. Actually, the county was first named Navasota County, but changed to Brazos County a year later. In March of 1841, Judge Robert E.B. Baylor of the 3rd Judicial District Court, for whom Baylor University is named, presided over the first session of court in Brazos County in Joseph Ferguson's small cabin near Ferguson Springs on the Navasota River. J.J. Stewart served as district attorney, J.D. Overton as district clerk, and Elliot McNeil Milliken as sheriff. The first jury trial was held under the shade of a cottonwood tree as the cabin was too small. 1841, the Congress that created the county also appointed a committee to locate a county seat. And this committee located the county seat in what they considered to be pretty close to the center of the county on 150 acres and named it Booneville after Mordecai Boone Sr., who was a member of the committee. This area is about where Tom Light Chevrolet and the Atkinson Toyota is running in a westerly direction toward the Booneville Cemetery, roughly in that area. A public square was set aside and the first log cabin was built, and then the log courthouse was built by volunteer labor in one day. That courthouse was only used for 5 years, and it was described by Harvey Mitchell, who earned the title Father of Brazos County, as having a dirt floor, one doorway, no windows, large spaces between the logs, and the chairs and tables were barred when court was in session. Obviously, it wasn't a very adequate courthouse. In 1846, the second courthouse was built. The commissioners let a contract with Harvey Mitchell for $150 to build this new courthouse. It was 18 by 26 feet, and although it was not practical, Judge Baylor and the lawyers congratulated the citizens on the progress. Some important lawyers in the state tried cases in this building, and on several occasions, General Sam Houston held the people spellbound from its rostrum. This second courthouse didn't provide a safe repository for the records, nor a jury room, so Harvey Mitchell kept the records at his house, and the jurors deliberated in the woods. 1854, the third courthouse was built, and it was the pride of the people. It was a two-story structure, had 4 offices on the first floor, and on the second floor it was used for the sessions of a county and district court. It had glass windows, tables, seats, and 2 small jury rooms. Then in 1871, as a result of the Houston and Texas Central Railroad coming to Bryan, the citizens of Brazos County on October 15, 1866, voted 190 to 42 to move the county seat to Bryan. For a couple of years, the court was held in rented buildings until Harvey Mitchell was awarded a contract to build a new courthouse. From 1868 until 1871, Harvey Mitchell furnished a courtroom at no cost to the county. The fourth courthouse had a stately appearance compared to its predecessors, but was seriously defective because of a lack of skill on the part of the supervising architect and workmen, poor quality, and it was not long before the foundations began to collapse. By reinforcement, the building lasted 23 years. In 1892, the fifth courthouse was built and completed on November the 1st, 1892. It was built of white sandstone from Comanche County, and red stone was used for trimming, which came from Pecos County. The cost was $65,000 and considered a magnificent structure in its day. It was raised by a contractor named Ted Hall from Kansas in 14 days. We'd all ride our bicycles down, and we weren't allowed to cross what was then called College Avenue. It's now Texas Avenue. And we'd park our bicycles under some shade trees across the street where the Bryan Independent School District Administration Building now stands. And we would watch, and they had a great big wrecking ball on what was called a drag line in those days, and they would swing it and hit the side of one of the walls, hit this courthouse, hit one of the walls, and a great cloud of dust would go up in the air, and you couldn't see anything for several minutes. And then when the dust cleared, a wall would have fallen. And he had dump trucks there, and then he had loaders, and they were hauling it off. And it was a very pretty courthouse, and it probably could have been renovated, but there was a lot of division in the community about building a brand new one, so that's what happened. But anyway, the famous Texas Red Cedar is on the southwest side of the present-day courthouse, which originally grew near Joseph Ferguson's cabin near the Navasota River, and was moved to the site of the first courthouse at Boonville in 1843. Later in 1870, the tree was moved from Boonville to its present location. And even though it's not in a picture of health by horticultural standards, it still stands, and there's a marker by the tree. At the top of the fifth courthouse, before it was torn down, was a courthouse bell in the tower. And it was cast by Minley and Kimberly of Troy, New York. Shipped February the 8th, 1878, weighed 1,015 pounds. It's now displayed in the lobby of the sixth courthouse. The sixth courthouse was built and completed in 1955, and it won a national award for a young architectural firm named Coed, Rowlett, and Scott, which ended up being an international architectural firm of fame. Then in 1982 through 84, there was an addition to the 6 courthouse. Part of the original was torn down on the 25th of the William Joe O'Brien side and replaced by this addition. And it didn't receive any award or any acclaim, and in some circles it has a distinction, a dubious reputation and distinction of being one of the ugliest courthouses in Texas. The recent addition of the glass replacing some of the slabs that were defective when they were put on in 1982 through 84 seems to have been an improvement, but certainly not anything like it was originally. I want to mention some of the significant members of the Brazos County legal profession. We've had 2 presidents of the State Bar of Texas. One was some time back. Judge John N. Henderson was the judge of the 20th District Court back when the district consisted of Brazos, Milam, and Robertson counties. He was president of the State Bar from 1892 to 93. Judge Henderson was a Civil War veteran. He had lost his left arm at the Battle of Sharpsburg when he was 19 years old. John M. Lawrence III was the 95th president of the State Bar of Texas from 1975 to 1976. The 85th District Court has very unique special jurisdiction and is only one of 3 Texas State District Courts designated by the Immigration and Naturalization Service of the United States Department of Justice to hear and grant petitions of naturalization and citizenship. The other 2 district courts are in Edinburgh and Rio Grande City. All other citizenship and naturalization certificates are in the federal courts, so it's a distinct special jurisdiction for the 85th District Court, and the ceremonies are very heartwarming, and it's a real pleasure to see the new citizens from all over the world, particularly with A&M here, to come and become United States citizens. And through the years, I've known many of them, and many of them make some of the best citizens that we have. So it's really good that we have had this in this court, in the 85th District Court, for all these years. The Brazos County Bar Association has been very active and outstanding on a statewide level for some years. Received the Award of Merit from the State Bar, 1949. Again, received the Award of Merit from the State Bar in 1950, 1953, 1958, and 1975. We've had judges from Brazos County who have served on the state's appellate courts. 20th District Judge John N. Henderson, who I previously mentioned, served on the Court of Criminal Appeals in Austin. District Judge W.T. McDonald Sr. served as the presiding judge of the Court of Criminal Appeals in Austin. District Judge John M. Barron served on the 14th Court of Appeals in Houston. District Judge W.C. Davis served on the Court of Criminal Appeals in Austin. Brazos County Judge W.R. Vance served on the 10th Court of Appeals in Waco. We've had a lot of interesting cases tried in the district courts of Brazos County. I want to just discuss briefly a few that are fairly interesting and significant. Back on December the 14th, 1933, about 6:30 p.m., around closing time, John Seeley Caldwell and his wife Celeste walked out of their store, Caldwell Jewelry Store, which at that time was located on Main Street in Bryan, on the west side of Main Street. The store ran from Main all the way through to Bryan Street, front door being on Main and the back door being on Bryan Street, but they would come and go through the back. That's where the office was, and there also was an area where watches and rings and so forth were repaired. But as they went out the back door, after closing up, 3 men came around the corner, which would have been the First National Bank at that time, and yelled, "We want you." John Seeley said, "What do you want?" And one of the men replied, "We want what you got." They took the Caldwells back in the store, wouldn't let John Seeley turn on the light. They lit matches for him to open the safe. Meanwhile, Celeste was standing near the trash basket, and she had some really nice, fine diamond rings. And so she quietly took them off and dropped them in the trash can. And they made a little noise, and one of them said, "Oh, there's a burglar alarm." And they stopped making any noise for a minute, and then there was total silence, so they assumed there wasn't a burglar alarm. And they never looked in the trash can. So they went on, had John Seeley open the safe, took everything out. They had a lot of fine jewelry in there people had bought because Christmas was not too far away and these things were on layaway and such as that, and then being sized and so forth, rings. And then they took the Caldwells to their car. This was a Whitey Walker gang. And they were Whitey Walker, Blackie Thompson, and Roy Johnson. And they were associated with Bonnie Parker and Clyde Barra. They took the Caldwells in this car, a Ford V8. Celeste said first time she had ever ridden in a V8 because they were just coming on the market in those days, in 1933. And they started driving out into the country. And they spoke dog Latin or pig Latin between themselves. They got out around the Curtin area, got them out of the car, and marched them across the field. Celeste had trouble walking in high heels because it was a rough terrain and it had rained. And Roy Johnson helped her across a gully. They tied their arms around a tree, and their thumbs were tied together with copper wire, and they left them there. John Seeley was a pretty good outdoorsman and pretty rugged individual. He and my dad used to fish and hunt together, and so he was always outdoors and was a pretty resourceful person. So he freed himself in about 30 minutes and freed Celeste, and they walked into the nearby town of Curtin and caught a ride into town. Contacted Sheriff Reed, Brazos County Sheriff at the time, and were taken to Houston that night, and they identified these Whitey Walker gang from mugshots at the Houston Police Department. And it turned out that all three of them had broken out of the Oklahoma State Prison in August of 1933, just 4 months before the Caldwell robbery. And it later developed that the gang had rented a house right down in what was College Avenue in Baker, it's now Texas Avenue, for about a month before this robbery, and they had staked out the Caldwell's routine, been in and out of the store, and when they closed up and so on, observed their habits, and so they knew when they'd be leaving that afternoon and so forth. They had also committed robberies in Palestine and a bank robbery up in Marlin. And they were ultimately caught in Florida after a gunfight with the police, and 2 of them were wounded, and they were brought back for trial. And the Johnson and Walker were tried here in Brazos County. Thompson was tried in Falls County for the bank robbery up there, and the jury deliberated 1 hour and gave him the death penalty. Johnson and Walker received life sentences here in Brazos County. In 1986, Roy Johnson wrote Celeste a letter asking her to help him obtain parole. John Seeley and Celeste were close friends of my my mother and dad, and occasionally she would mention the robbery, but she obviously didn't help Roy Johnson obtain parole. Another significant case out of the court of Brazos County, this 85th District Court, was the A&M Coed trials. 1958, 2 women attempted to register at A&M and were denied. A lawsuit was filed alleging discrimination against them as women, and Judge W.T. McDonald Sr. ruled that women should be admitted to A&M because it was a land-grant college, and these women had equal rights under the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution. Also, A&M was the only land-grant college out of 69 that did not admit women. Judge McDonald was an Aggie, the class of 33, but there was a tremendous outcry of opposition by the Cadet Corps, and he was hung in effigy at 2 locations on campus, and his home in Bryan was rocked. He received ugly letters and telegrams alleging such things that he had ruled to admit women so the merchants in downtown Bryan could sell the women clothes. The Court of Appeals in Waco reversed the ruling, stating women could attend Texas Women's University at Denton. However, the case served its purpose. A&M President Earl Rudder explained in speeches if the A&M board and former students did not begin to move toward coeducation, the courts would force the issue, so by 1971, women were admitted without qualification. Another significant case out of the 272nd District Court of Brazos County was what I call an environmental issue case. It involved Elf Atachem, which is a chemical manufacturing company. It involved the arsenic in the natural drainage system of a large portion of Bryan and Brazos County and ultimately the state of Texas and beyond. During the 1930s, a company named Pinwall Chemical built a plant and began manufacturing insecticides for boll weevils. It contained a large amount of arsenic. The plant was located on Dodge and Finfeather, just off of Old College Road and at the north end of Finfeather Lake. Finfeather was a natural watershed for northwest Bryan, and when the railroad built an elevated railroad bed and turned it into a lake to impound the water to refill the boilers on the engines, this big lake remained, and you can still see the remnants of the tower and tank where the trains would stop and they would pump the water up into this tank and fill the boiler on the steam-driven engines before we went to diesel engines. But in any event, with this lake just south of the Pinwall plant, which later became Atachem, when they washed the equipment down, the arsenic would wash out of the plant into the headwaters of the lake. And then, anytime there was a rain, Finfeather Lake overflows into a little creek which is called No Name Creek, which runs down under Williamson Drive past what used to be the Little League Park into the municipal lake, which is now the Travis Bryan Jr. Golf Course. And it's called the Municipal Lake or the Travis Bryan Jr. Golf Course Lake, often known now as Lake Arsenic. And then when it overflows into Delwood or Country Club Creek, which runs in eventually to Burton Creek, which runs into Carter Creek. Carter Creek runs into the Navasota River. The Navasota River runs into the Brazos River, which runs into the Gulf of Mexico, which runs into the rest of the world eventually. So the EPA and everyone involved in environmental issues got involved in this lawsuit. Ultimately, the court order, Judge Bradley Smith entered an order that the lake be drained, allowed to dry, and all of the silt was removed and hauled to a certified landfill in Oklahoma. Cost approached $10 million. But even then, not all of the arsenic was removed. A good portion of it was, but there's still a residual arsenic in the lake. But the scientists say so long as it's not disturbed, it's harmless. And so now there are signs placed all over the lake and no activities are allowed. Another case are the Lake Waco murders. The Lake Waco murders were sent, Judge George Allen called me and asked me if I would try the case because there'd been so much publicity when he tried one of them in Waco that he could not have another trial there of the other defendants. The fact situation was there was a store owner named Deeb who owned a store near the Methodist Orphans Home. And two young girls would come there all the time and shop. And he befriended them and told them that he needed to use them as part-time help sometime. And in order to do so, he needed to have workers' comp insurance on them and ask them to sign these documents, which he said were applications. In truth and fact, they were applications for life insurance policies. He took out sizable insurance policies for them, and then he hired an ex-convict named of David Spence and gave him pictures of these two girls and said he'd give him a sizable amount of money if he killed them. Spence goes and gets two of his friends, Gilbert and Tony Melendez, and Deeb had told him that these girls like to go to this park on Lake Waco. And so they would drive around off and on looking for the girls at this park. And one day they see two young girls with a young boy at Koenig Park. And they wait till dark. They sexually abuse the little girls. They kill them and they kill the young boy. They load them in the back of a truck and go to the opposite side of Lake Waco to Speakerville Park and dump the bodies. They only had a photograph of the ones that he had contracted, and these young girls that were killed were not the ones from the orphanage. They were totally different. The two that Deeb contracted to have killed are still alive and well today and in contact with the families of the young girls that were killed. And they were at the trial of the Spence case here in Bryan. Very nice young girls, but it has had a tremendous effect on them being peripherally involved in this whole horrible situation. Deeb was tried first as the man that contracted with Spence, and that's what received so much publicity in Waco. So then Spence's case was sent down here and tried in the 85th District Court. He received the death penalty. A book was written about it called Careless Whispers. There was a TV special made about it. A lot of law was made as a result of the case. It was the first time that bite marks were ever used and admitted into evidence in Texas because Spence had bitten one of the girls on her breast, and I ordered him to give a mold of his teeth, his bite, and it matched up the marks on her breast, and that was one of the strong connecting pieces of evidence. At his trial, the psychiatrist who was testifying about his propensity for dangerousness, he testified, "He is dangerous even to those of us who are in this courtroom. If he had the means, he would kill each of us here. I have to admit that I am very frightened at this very moment. The palms of my hands are shaking, not because I am nervous about testifying, it is because of him." That's how bad this fellow was. Long about in 2007, Ed Elmore, a College Station attorney, and some of us were discussing about the fact that we didn't record and have a good archives of our Brazos County Bar Association history, and it was suggested that we do some type of a video, a forum or something, and get some of the older lawyers to relate some of their experiences. And so we ended up turning it into a continuing education program and as well as a historic preservation type video. So somewhere around 2008, we had this forum, and they asked me to preside, and we got some lawyers together that had been licensed to practice over 40 years, and they told of their experiences as practitioners and gave some advice to younger lawyers. And there's a lot of humor that was injected into it, and I think you all might find some of the excerpts interesting.
Good afternoon. I don't have nearly as illustrious a past as Judge McDonald. I grew up here in Brazos County also, went through the Bryan school system, went to Texas A&M, went to Baylor, and came straight back here and started practicing law at the ripe old age of 23. And that's about the extent of my pedigree. When Ed called and talked to me about participating here today, one of the things that he mentioned was for us to comment briefly on some of the differences, real or perceived, between the Bar Association as it existed, for example, in 1967 when I came back, and now. I probably can't do as good a job in discussing that as some of the other lawyers, some of the other older lawyers who still have lots of contact with the local bar. My practice is very limited now, so I don't have that much contact. But the thing that came quickly to mind was back years ago, we had a very small bar association, but the thing that was the overriding consideration was that since the Bar Association was so small, you wound up working with and against the same people all the time. If you wound up in a divorce, the chances are excellent that that the lawyer on the other side was going to be the person against whom you had the last divorce case, and so on. But the thing that was so impressive back then was that we got mad at each other just like everybody does now. But the thing that was so impressive back then is we were courteous for the most part. We were courteous and nice to each other and respectful to each other, and respectful particularly in the courtroom. There's one thing that comes to mind that I guess is probably marginal, but at the risk of being cast in a darker light, I'm going to go ahead and tell it. I was trying a divorce case one time before Judge Davis, and a lawyer whom you all know, but I suppose probably should remain nameless, instead of standing up and saying, "Your Honor, I object," he stood up and screamed, "Bullshit." The court reporter, who was Mrs. Mildred Carpenter, was a very old lady at the time even, she froze. I don't think she knew how to get that word into her machine. Judge Davis's mouth fell open, and the lawyer, then realizing what he had done, dropped his hands to his side, looked straight at Judge Davis, and he said, I mean, respectfully, bullshit, Your Honor. True story. But the punchline is we all remained friendly and cordial, and we worked with each other and trusted each other. The thing that I notice now, and most of my contact with outside lawyers is with lawyers from other cities who come in here. I do builder and development work. Lawyers from other cities who come in, and it is almost immediately adversarial. And I think that's the thing that leaps out at me in thinking about this, because I think my assessment back then was we started trying to be friendly and courteous and nice, and if it became adversarial after that, maybe so, but we never did start it that way. I was the one who suggested maybe I could sell some of my 10 minutes to Billy Payne, because I'm not going to use 10, and I know he'll need some more. But one thing I do want to comment on, as far as saying something substantive so that it'll contribute to the CLE aspect of all this, is let's remember that there is a reason it's called the practice of law. There are not many cases that will come in either to your office or to the courtroom or even to my office that you can make a black and white application of the law to. And it's called the practice of law because you are encouraged to take the fact situation, the law, statutory case law, the law as you know it, and apply that law to that fact situation and reach a conclusion to the best of your ability. You can't go to a book and find an exact all 4 points fact situation for the most part. And what I see today, particularly in the real estate builder development field, I see people trying to go to the law and come up with the answer to every single question, and you can't do that. It is called the practice for a reason, and I encourage young lawyers with whom I speak to learn to practice law rather than to read a book and try to take the application and apply it to a set of facts that's not quite on all points. Having said all that, I am going to, since we've got so many judges here, I do have one quick thing I have to tell you. I got a, that's too long. I'm going to say one quick one about Judge McDonald. We were trying a criminal case one time when Tommy was the assistant district attorney. I was representing a guy named George Jenkins who had knocked over a service station over there on 25th Street. Allegedly. I knew he had done it because I heard him creating his alibi right behind me with several ladies of the night that he had asked to come in. And we tried the case, and in my own humble judgment, we're doing a really good job. And we were getting down toward the end, the ladies in the district clerk's office, and I knew about as much about criminal law as I knew about airplanes. And the ladies in the district clerk's office were commenting about what a good job we were doing and how it was really looking good. And Tom leaned over as he was cross-examining George, and I can't tell you why he was on the stand, but he was. And Tom looked at him and says, "George, I just have one final question." He said, "Would you lie to stay out of the penitentiary?" And instead of saying, "No, sir," George goes, "Oh, yes, sir, I sure would. I sure would." And everybody on the jury just started looking at each other and smiling, and I closed my briefcase. I knew it was over.
My father, who only had a 5th grade education, was really impressed that his son was made a lawyer, as he said it. So we happened to be in town one day, and it turns out Tom and I were having a contested divorce and before Judge Davis, and went down there and started at 9 o'clock and went all morning haranguing back and forth, and then we broke for lunch. And then Tom and I left to go have lunch together, as was the custom. And my daddy was just puzzled, and I noticed his furrowed brow, and I asked him, "What's the problem?" He said, "How can you guys sit there and holler at each other all morning and then go out and have lunch?" I said, "Well, hell, we're going to play golf this afternoon after we're through with that." So he didn't understand that, but that's the way it was.
Let me tell you another thing quickly, and this involves Judge McDonald. In the old days, just by virtue of the fact that we tried cases, when criminal trials came up, well, we had to take our turn in the barrel. Well, one of the worst turns I ever took in the barrel was in a very, very bad case here. It was the Merker trial. There was a man by the name of Merker that was murdered by 4 young people, 1 girl and 3 males. 2 of the males were brothers. Their name was Harris, and my guy's name I can't remember, but anyway, there you are, Dirty Red. So anyway, I'm representing Dirty Red, and this trial, if my memory is right, started approximately in September, and we didn't get through until February. I lost 20 pounds. During that, I've never been overweight. We were threatened, our lives threatened. But during the course of the trial, in in Judge Langley's courtroom, the table next to the jury was occupied always by the district attorney, and we then were over at that other one. I was sitting on the end where Tom is sitting, and then Dirty Red was sitting about where Judge McDonald is sitting. One of the guys over at the other table periodically would, I understand, turn, and when he caught Dirty Red's eye, and they were going for the death penalty, he would turn and get Dirty Red's eye and give the needle signal. Well, with regard to leaning back against the rail, and once again, you know, my guy did not have an IQ of plant life, but when the district attorney would give him the needle, my guy would respond. Now understand, the jury's right over there in the same direction of the district attorney, and when the district attorney would give my guy, unbeknownst to me, the needle sign, my guy would return a sign to him. And so here I'm trying to keep a guy from being electrocuted who's flagging the jury. And that's not all of it. When we get to, of course, they're found guilty in the first stage, and then we get to punishment. And Dirty Red is being tried along with one of the Harris brothers. And so we go through the second part when everybody's getting up saying, "Don't kill my baby." And so Mrs. Harris got up there and said, you know, "Don't kill my baby." Well, after she finishes "Don't kill my baby," she gets down off the stand and she walks right across here, and her son, Danny, was sitting right there. And she falls in a swoon into Danny's arms, and the room was rimmed with officers. And Judge McDonald, you know, was hammering to get order and for the officers to get on this stack where Mrs. was swooning on son. And as they get them separated, there is a butcher knife half as long as my leg laying right there on the floor. And so here we have a scene in the courtroom in the punishment stage where the mama is slipping a knife, you know, to one of the defendants. It was quite memorable. But
I remember one case. We had a place out here south of town called Wild Animals International, and it was funded by a local bank here, Bank of A&M, and the guy that ran it, he was you know, you might say that he was an Indiana Jones, but he had short pants on. And he had all kinds of animals out there, and he would go back to Africa and wherever he was going and bring these animals back in, etc. So Bank of A&M had loaned him a bunch of money. He went over to Africa, and nobody could find him, and they wanted to foreclose and all this sort of stuff. So finally he came back, and he had already told everybody, "By God, I'm going to take all these animals back and everything." So I was working for Bank of A&M, and I filed an injunction proceeding against him. And so we were up there, and the Honorable Judge John M. Barron was the judge. And that was David and John's father. And, you know, he's pretty strong fellow. I mean, you know, he was very good lawyer, very good judge and everything. And he was very fair. So we were going along, and all of a sudden the judge says, "Mr. Stacy, would you approach the bench?" And I said, "Sir?" And he said, "Mr. Stacy, would you approach the bench?" And I said, "Lord, what did I do wrong now?" So I went up to the bench, and you know, I was standing right here like that. He said, "Mr. Stacy, come around the side if you would, please." And so I went around the side, and he bent over a little bit, and he says, "Pat, you see that guy over there, Indiana Jones?" He says, "He's staring at you like he wants to kill you." I said, "No, I didn't know." "Well, man, he is mad at you." He said, "Here, take my pistol. You might want to take it back there with you." That's a true story. That's a true story.
I think there is one unique thing about Brazos County, and that is the 85th District Court having had 3 fathers and 3 sons as the district judge. The first combination would have been Judge W.C. Davis Sr. and his son, W.C. Davis Jr., though they did not succeed each other. And then there was W.S. Barron, who had succeeded Judge W.C. Davis Sr., and his son was John M. Barron, and then W.T. McDonald Sr. and W.T. McDonald Jr. Was the other father-son combination. And I think there might be a picture someplace, but it's when these, as I recall, I think it's in Judge McDonald's office, that it was made of all three. Well, no, W.C. Davis Sr. had passed away, but the rest of them were all shown in one picture at one time. I think that's quite unique, and I dare say that there's not another district court in the state of Texas who's ever had that type of a history. If I may digress a little bit right now, I think that I would like to recall the various secretaries for these attorneys and who assisted them a great deal. And I would recall at this time Ms. Bess Barron, who was Judge W.S. Barron's secretary when he retired from the bench and practiced law here in Bryan. Then we would recall Nina McVeigh, who was the right hand of Elmer McVeigh when he was in partnership with Bill Moore, the state senator at that time. And then the lady that I used to call the other part of Good and Good, Sarah Good, was Philip Good's right hand. And then there were various other ladies who were secretaries, like Aline Brogdon for Judge Law Henderson. That was a famous couple or a pair that took care of most of the real estate practice and the work that the Bryan Building and Loan did. And then I'm sure Judge Vance would recall Annie Ruth Ware, who was his secretary when he was the county judge of Brazos County. She was the daughter of A.S. Ware, who had been a previous county judge and a law practitioner here. Then one very famous lady that I see so many times as witnesses on wills was Miss Bessie Crenshaw, Mr. Bob Armstrong's secretary. And I've seen her on any number of wills lately and in years back, actually.
Since Judge Baylor held court 170 years ago on the Navasota River, Brazos County has made significant contributions to the Texas legal profession and judiciary. And there have been cases from Brazos County that have become precedents in the jurisprudence of Texas, such as the first DNA case in Texas was tried in the 85th District Court. The first black grand jury foreman in Texas was appointed by a district judge in Brazos County in the late 50s. Pre-sentence investigations, originally used in Brazos County, later served as a framework for the state law that is still in effect. Now, in conclusion, I assert that Brazos County has a very rich and interesting legal history, and I'm very proud to have been some small part of it. And I think for the size of our county, we have made many contributions, and probably more than most, if not most all counties our size. Godspeed, and may there be justice for all.